Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale as well as the latest episode of Stumptown. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time and I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Riverdale, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Stumptown. But the first thing I want to talk about is this week's episode of Riverdale. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. We'll start off with Archie's side of things, which is interesting because obviously Archie kind of has to deal with kind of a little bit of the prejudice that is that side of town, because for him it's like no matter what happens, like everyone's kind of got their own preconceived notions about, oh, it's like all those kids, they're troublemakers, which some of them are, but it's like that particular shopkeeper is like, oh, keep your hoodlums out of my place. It's bad enough that you got this place up and running and doing blah 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 blah, disparaging Archie and everything that they're trying to do there, which obviously Archie's in that tough spot because Dodger is basically got the kids running out and doing stuff for him on a criminal level, which is obviously impeding a lot of business. Sadly, Archie ends up finding out later on that a lot of people are kind of in a position, a lot of store owners are in a position of they have to pay extortion level. So there's almost like there is definitely like that gang territory of like, oh, this is our area, you want to operate in our area, you're going to feed us some of that money for a little protection fee to make sure, hey, be pretty bad if your store got robbed, hey, be pretty bad if your store got burned to the ground, that type of situation. So Archie's kind of got to go against, it's a situation of what is already a layer of established fear and coercion, that he kind of has to fight against. And I liked, the message he ended up getting from FP, and it made so much sense that FP out of anyone would give him that message, because it's like, right, we like serpents, the serpents had that type of reputation to begin with themselves, but he's like, what you do is you talk to them, make them realize like you make them realize that you're a part of this community and that they're a part of it as well, that it's like really hard to kind of hate on a person that once you've kind of got to know them, because they become like, well, it's almost like, oh, there's your neighbor. It's like, especially everything that Archie's trying to do. And I love that, like, obviously when he's saying all this and Alice is there kind of recording all of it, and she looks at the one dude, because I guess she knows he's one of the guys that's giving Archie and the kids a hard time. She's kind of looking at him, kind of being all smug and everything, like, yeah, he's talking about you. I love Archie being like, the fact of the matter is we're kind of in this together. I'm here to stay. The fact of the matter is sort of a big brother program, so if you want to have such a problem, like, come get to know us, see what we're doing here, what we're trying to do here. And the fact of the matter is, if you still have a problem with me, that's fine. And Danny, just stay out of my way. I'm like, yo, it's just cool seeing and hearing Archie kind of talk like a boss. It's pretty badass. So. And at the same time this is all happening, he's doing his vigilante thing, which his second time go around didn't go too well, because it's a sad thing of it. He gives that lady her purse back and she like maces him in the face. It's like, that sucks. I guess because he's a little scary and you're already scared, but it's like he took down, I guess it's that thing of like, oh, you stopped the bad guy who was trying to rob me, but who's to say you're not trying to take it for yourself to kind of rob me yourself? It's like, oh, stopping the robber so you can rob me, but it's kind of sad. It's like he was literally handing your purse back. You're like, oh, get away from me. It's like, oh, come on, lady, that's not cool. So that didn't work out for him, but I do like that he is kind of getting a little more menacing, because he goes to Dodger and Dodger gets a weapon out of it, like cardboard. By the time he comes back, Archie's gun. I'm like, yes, I love it when, in particular, it seems like that's a big vigilante thing. I feel like not many superheroes do that, but like I feel like that, because obviously that to me, I don't know how many superheroes actually do that, because the only superhero I know that does that is, based on a TV show, Daredevil kind of does that. I feel like it's a Batman thing, but I don't know if it started with Batman. The whole, like, you turn around, you automatically think of Batman, because he's the hero that does it the most. So it's a very, like, he's like, you're dead, so next time I see you. So I like that he's just like, next time you turn around, Archie. It's like, I don't know how people, like, how you realistically do that, like, disappear like that, but it's pretty badass and, intimidating, especially because he looks the way he does. Like, it kind of does remind me of kind of like a very, like, cross between Spider-Man's original outfit, but also kind of has just kind of like how, like, low level and gritty it kind of feels like his vigilante level stuff. It kind of makes me think of a little bit of a Daredevil, specifically in the sense of like the black suit. It kind of reminds me kind of that, but I'm interested to see where that story ends up going in that regard of like, is he, because obviously he started a red circle in the past. It's something I've talked about before. So I'm like, is he going to do kind of something similar to that? But now kind of try and spin it to be like, no, this is going to be a better version of that. So he's going to get like a whole group of people. Is it something he's going to do on his own? I get the feeling like if he lets Mad Dog know, Mad Dog's going to be like, yo, bro, I got your back type of situation. Maybe even Reggie kind of jump on it. Like I said, bring back the red circle, but kind of give them a better mission to kind of patrol the town. But then it's going to turn to a thing of like, well, you're no longer going to be heroes, you're going to be vigilantes, and you're going to be seen as kind of a bit of a gang. And it might be that thing of like, oh, you get Dodger out of there, but then it might be that situation of maybe people who, if you sign people up for it, maybe they'll get a little power hungry, maybe even you yourself will, and you'll start replace, rather than, what you started off as supposed to being the solution to Dodger ends up just being his replacement. It depends on if they decide to go down. I'm curious to see how they end up handling it. So there's that side of things. There's things with Veronica. I'm actually surprised she's helping out Hermione like she is. I mean, because the grand scheme of things, she made it clear, like, I'm not helping either one. But I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's like, well, despite everything, my mom's still my mom, and dad's still my dad, but mom's a lot more I can forgive a lot that my mom's done, more so than I can forgive anything that my dad's done. So maybe that's kind of what made her kind of swayed, and because like I said, she made it clear from the beginning, like, I'm not kind of giving my public support to either one, but maybe certain things kind of changed her mind. Because I guess it's in a position of both of their trials are coming up, and it's like, I'd rather help out my mom. At the very least, I think it'd be kind of, maybe in her mind, it's like, it's a middle finger to my dad after all the trouble he's kind of causing me. So if I help out my mom, it's just kind of a bigger middle finger to, Hiram. So I guess that's another reason for doing it. But now it turns into the whole complicated thing of like, well, the fact of the matter is, having to deal with like, obviously, everything they did was to set up Hiram. Well, everything, Veronica did on her side of things was about setting up Hiram. So, obviously there's validity to all the terrible stuff Hiram's done, but there's no direct connections, no evidence to kind of lead to that. It took them fabricating evidence to finally get him busted for stuff he was legitimately doing, but obviously he's smarter to not make the mistakes that they bust. It's like trying to get Al Capone for tax evasion, but in fact it wasn't him actually doing a tax evasion. Someone just planted the evidence to make it seem like he was doing tax evasion. That's what it kind of comes down to. So I just find that fascinating. And I guess in the grand scheme of things, it kind of makes sense that things would kind of be as messy as they are, because it is wrongs on both sides. Like, obviously, Hermione did set up the whole situation to kill Hiram, but she has to pretend like she didn't, when in actuality you did. You have full intentions of killing him. So there's that whole snap. But I'm trying to remember who it was that found out that she was behind. I want to say it wasn't it Jughead who found out the truth behind it? But he didn't tell Veronica, if I remember correctly. So Veronica's under the impression like he had nothing to do with it, that her mom had nothing to do with it, but in actuality she really did. I forgot about that, because like Jughead made it a point not to tell Veronica what she found out. So, and then kind of going back to it, like the whole situation of like, oh yeah, here's this cabin. It's like, yeah, but Hermione's like, my name isn't on that. It was never in my name, but now it looks like, oh, the cabin where FP shot and killed Tall Boy. It seems like, oh, that you have a connection there, but she's like, no, I didn't. So it's like, why don't you come out and say that? It's like, well, she can't, because it reminds you, it's like, right, her little torrid affair she had with Sheriff Minetta, and it's like, also the same place you murdered him. I wonder how much of that came up when she was talking to Archie's mom and Veronica. Like, how much of that was something she was like really tell, like, did she talk? Because it's like, yeah, because the whole conversation was skipped over, where it's like Veronica's like, okay, you're in that position where it's like legitimately they're looking at you for this one thing. We can't let this case go on too long, because if we do, they're gonna start digging and they're gonna find out about all the other super illegal shit that you've done. So now it turns to that thing of like I said, in that conversation, like I would assume, well, to be fair, I guess Minetta was kind of a bad guy, so it didn't matter to them, or like I said, not, because like they brought that conversation up, so it makes me think she did probably have to explain, yeah, I killed Minetta there. It's like, oh god, mom, you've been up there, of course. It was just kind of an interesting situation. But obviously, Veronica, being the lodge that she is, taking advantage of this situation, she ends up blackmailing the mayor, because all she has to do is like, okay, mom, you say guilty to this one thing, you find yourself, like, they find you guilty for this, then you can walk away from everything, because like they'll stop investigating. Once they've got you for this, they'll stop investigating. Then we'll get, Governor Dooley to kind of, hey, get her pardon. All you have to do is blackmail him yet again. And even it's like, oh, you think I'm gonna let you do that? And it's like, oh yeah, seems like you're just gonna let her do that to you again. Super blackmailing you hard. Which, hey, it works out in the end. I wasn't expecting that situation where it's like, oh yeah, that lady that we kept seeing in the courtroom, I'm like, oh, what's the significance? Who's she going to end up being? Never would have expected it to turn out like, oh, she's a private investigator. It's like, oh, I mean, granted that legally that wouldn't stand up. The whole fact is that she secretly bugged Veronica's place. But what was brought to, was it the prosecutor's attention and stuff like that? It made it so that Hiram could be let go of this situation, and it gets revealed who she is. Apparently, she's Hiram's other daughter, and for her, it's like, he called upon me to do something. It's like he couldn't trust you anymore, so he called the one person he can trust was me, which we know that situation is going to get really, really interesting, because obviously a daughter that you've never mentioned before, which obviously that I highly doubt that's Hermione's other daughter. I doubt that's the thing, so it's like, who's her mom? And obviously, because like we know Hiram, is connected to that mob world, so I guess she's kind of connected to it as well. Kind of being like, oh, I'm gonna be the one that kind of your fixer, which is gonna be interesting, because I think I already kind of get an idea what her story is, of like, she's been ignored by her dad most of her life. Like, he probably checked in once in a while, but no matter what the circumstances of like, oh, she's your shining star right now, but despite everything, Veronica's still your shining star. And I think that's going to be a thing of her being like, no, I'm finally in dad's good graces. He's going to look at me and see what I'm my potential and everything. But I don't think it's going to work out like that. I think the moment Veronica shows, like, I don't, despite him being pissed at her with everything, I think there's a part of him that is almost proud at her playing the game the way she does. It's kind of like, it's like, you are my daughter. So that little bit of favoritism might rub his other daughter the wrong way. We'll see what ends up happening, whether that ends up being the story, because maybe it could go down that route, maybe it won't, but it's going to be interesting. It's so interesting because now, like, Betty's just learning, obviously, obviously she found out about her brother in season 2, but now it's a situation of it being, Charles being there, but now on top of it, Veronica's learning that she's got another sibling out there. It's kind of interesting. I mean, sad when you actually think about it. Amongst them, the only person who doesn't have a sibling now is Archie. I mean, to be fair, his sibling is basically Jughead, because they grew up like brothers. So, but it's just like, Jughead's got Jelly Bean, Veronica's got this new sister, and Betty has Charles. I mean, granted, they're not the most, at least when it comes to Betty and Veronica's cases, they're not like, close as, good relationships like Jelly Bean and Jughead, but still, nonetheless, it's really interesting circumstances. And speaking of Jughead, I didn't talk about it a lot, but I did like kind of like that story, because it did seem like this whole situation kind of rubbed FP the wrong way. First, it was the books. He was like, maybe I threw him out or whatever. He's like, oh, you outgrew those books, and you're like, why are you being such kind of a bit of an asshole? And it's like, oh, cause we hear his story about, like, the fact is that, like, my dad wasn't that great. He, he was a drunk, and he took out all his anger and frustration on me and your grandmother. The fact of the matter, kind of basically calling him an asshole. And he's like, the fact is, I'm not going to go to some school where they're going to worship him and talk about, oh, how great he was. In actuality, he wasn't, So obviously, Forsyth Jones the first, a very touchy subject for FP. It puts Jughead in this interesting position, because for him, it's like, he learned from the dude that shows up at the school. It's like, all right, my grandfather was a writer, right? Oh, a great writer. But it's like, for him, it's like he never heard about that, because I guess, obviously with those circumstances, you can understand why FP would never talk about him. That's actually even something that was never, I don't know if that was ever even brought up last season during the Midnight Club episode. I said Midnight Club. What is that what they were called? I don't remember now. All of them, like the whole Griffins and Gargoyles storyline when they were younger, when they were actually at Riverdale High themselves, like all the parents. I'm wondering, I don't think that ever came up about his parents specifically. The only parent I think we really learned a little bit about was Fred's dad, so I think that's about it. But regardless of that, What was also interesting was like the missing pages. I was like, what is that all about? I guess each one of the pages from the books, like there's at least one missing page, and I guess it was like a little note Jughead's grandfather had left for him, but his dad, obviously having the issue, he didn't want Jughead to have any connection to his grandfather, so he just ripped the pages out. It turns because the entire time Jughead thought those books were given to him by his dad, but it's like they were actually given to him by his grandfather. Which it seems like his grandfather's still alive, because FP was like, the fact of the matter is I haven't talked to him. I don't know where he is. Maybe he does. Well, Jughead's like, do you want me to go look for him? But it's like, no. He's like, I want nothing to do with him. So it's like, the fact of the matter is, it's even the whole thing of like, oh, the fact is you gave me your dad's name, so why you hate him so much if you gave me his name? It's like, yeah, but it's also my name. So the fact is, I guess in FP's mind, it's like, I took that name and try to make something of it. And the fact is, FP has this complicated situation, but you can make the argument he did make something of it. He is sheriff, but he wants Jughead to take that name and make it his own, to do some great stuff with it, to kind of change the history that has come with that name, that being his father. But also, when you look at it, certain aspects of FP's history, probably, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff he doesn't look back on favorably, so regardless of all that, I am curious to find out in what shape or form will Jughead's grandfather pop up in the story. Is he actually going to pop up? I would say, because they're putting so much attention on him, it makes you wonder. Plus, there's a whole thing that those was Stonewall 4 or whatever that Jughead brings up a little bit. He's like, yeah, he looked into it, and there have actually been like 4 people that have gone missing in the past. So the fact is, they keep sprinkling that in. That must mean that potentially might turn into a bigger storyline, but we'll see. Obviously, you have Brett kind of being the asshole he does. Like, that was an interesting, basically, game of murder. That was kind of interesting, of like how, like, oh yeah, you wink, and like, oh, the person, they have to wait 5 seconds, and then they die. Like, I like that. And then it comes down to the 3, and I love that it's like, oh, that dude dies, and then Jughead kind of winks, and Brett's like, oh, it's him, he's a killer. I knew it. It's like, for one, you're shitty at this. It's like, literally, the fact of the matter is, the home dude just died. It should have been pretty obvious that was Jughead before he winked at you, but you were too slow on the draw. So it's like, you can't, yeah, Jughead easily won the game because he already winked at you. It's like, but I already knew. It's like, excuses. Come on, bro. But nevertheless, him looking down on Jughead, because there is some part of him, I guess, because I think he just feels like he has something he has to prove, of like, because Jughead's coming in acting like, oh, he's thinking he's hot shit. Like, the fact is, don't look down on us just because we come from a privileged position. The only reason why you're here is because you're poor and you come from the background that you do. That's the only reason why no one cares about your writing and blah, 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 blah. And obviously he's trying to do everything he can to get under Jughead's skin. Notice he never gets physical with Jughead. Notice that every time it's just him running his mouth, because there must be a part of him that knows, like, well, from the background that Jughead's had, he would kick your ass, and you know that, so you're trying to act so tough. But it's like, it's like, even you kind of get a little, I mean, the last time Jughead kind of came at you, you got shook big time. You were like freaked out. So it's like, but now you're trying to act all tough and trying to readjust yourself, because you know that Jughead's not going to do anything, because it will mean getting in trouble and getting booted out of the school. But Jughead takes it as an opportunity, and listening to his dad about, like, screw what they think of him. Whatever reason you got into school, you're in the school now. So do your best and outshine of them. Show them that just because of where you came from doesn't mean that you can't outshine them. Show them that even with their privileged positions, that you can come out on top and be even better than them. So Jughead's really into this, more so than kind of show everyone up, but more so than anything, show Brett up. There's also the whole thing with Moose. What was her name? Donna? Kind of was like, oh, see, there's this, like, about him being in art, like, military prep or something. Like, I'm like, I don't know about that, man. That just seems a little fishy. Donna seems fishy, because just the fact is that she was making out with Moose, and just, I don't know, the way she kind of went along with the whole Jughead thing. It seemed like she might be cool, and then the Jughead thing happened. It's like, oh, you're literally the one that drugged him. You played a part in all this, so it kind of shows, like, I don't know. Maybe they're all kind of spoiled in their own right, sure, but maybe the fact is one of them is more so, I don't know. I kind of think, like, maybe it seems like Brett's kind of the bad guy, but maybe he is, but maybe Donna's worse. Like, I think maybe we'll get kind of a reveal. Like, I don't know. It just seems interesting. Like, they seem cool at other points, and other points they just seem like complete and utter entitled assholes. But, we'll ultimately have to wait and see where things kind of go on that front. And then on the other side of this episode, it's the whole situation with Betty, and she's in that, that FBI training program. She brings Kevin along, which I love Kevin the entire time. It's like, all right, you're hot half brother. And even Betty's just kind of like, because you can see it on Betty's face every time. It's like, why do you keep referencing how hot my brother is? But it's like, is your brother gay, straight? And honestly, Betty's like, honestly, I don't know. Because even that's something she's like, right, he popped into my life, but I haven't really gotten an opportunity to really know Charles. He knows so much about us, but we don't really know anything about him. I mean, to be fair, let's not forget, like, the last person that came into your lives pretending to be someone that he wasn't, so there's always that possibility, but I doubt it. But regardless, it is kind of interesting. But Betty kind of noticing immediately one, circling back to that Kevin thing real quickly, I guess that showed that Fang might be in the same situation as Polly, where he's getting like deprogrammed, because there hasn't been anything on that front with the whole Fang situation. So it makes me think, like, I'm not remembering that wrong, right? Fang and Kevin dated, didn't they? Because I know Kevin and Moose did before Moose moved away, but it's like Kevin and Fang were a thing too, right? Yeah, cause I forgot. Stupid me. Right, that's the whole reason why he was going to go with Fang. He wanted to be with Fang and everything. Right. Regardless, but I guess that shows you that he's not around. If like Kevin's shopping around, for other options. But regardless, at the program, they bring up these serial killers, and Betty, eerily enough, was able to pinpoint, oh, that person's a serial killer. And Charles is like, wow, aces. It's like, oh, this last one, none of them were the guilty party in a particular thing. And it's like, oh, wow, look at you, Betty, on fire. But then it's like, what do they all have in common? Oh, yeah, that serial killer gene. I have to look into that. Is that like a psychological, a real thing, or is that something they're just making up for the show? I thought it was kind of interesting because, like, I thought that was 100% BS that Alice came, like, they show the flashback and everything. I was like, right, that's interesting because that was something that was set up and thrown out there last season that they never really went back to, not really too much. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you kind of look back and you're like, oh, it kind of makes sense, but it's like, to think that, it's like, oh, I thought Alice was just saying that just to be hurtful, the whole situation, like, oh, yeah, the serial killer gene. Then there's the whole thing when Polly was pretending to be Betty, to be like, oh, look what you did to our cat, basically saying, like, how evil Betty kind of actually is. And that's something we haven't circled back to in a while, because she hasn't done the Dark Betty thing in a long, long, long time. But that kind of shows, that was kind of an example of her darker side. But I guess you can make the argument she doesn't need to do the Dark Betty thing anymore, because her darker side has kind of bubbled to the surface just because of how much time she spent around her dad and everything. Maybe that's one way to look at it, maybe not. But regardless, it's something to kind of think about. But the fact is, it's kind of got her freaked out, because she's like, now she's starting to think like, holy crap, the only reason why I can recognize these serial killers so much is because I have it there. I mean, look what my dad became. And like, in fact, in marriage, that was always a fear of hers, that she was going to end up like her dad. Even to the point she even lied to Kevin about the fact is that she had it. At first, she's like, no, I don't have it. But obviously, it started making her get fearful more and more, because she had a memory of her when she was younger, killing a cat with a rock. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty brutal, because there's a whole thing of like, oh yeah, serial killers had that thing of like, oh yeah, they kill animals at first. That's kind of like the, obviously most crime dramas would be like, oh yeah, that's the telltale signs of a serial killer or a sociopath or a psychopath. Once again, I never know the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath. There is a very distinct difference. I'm just not aware of it. It always comes up, but I can never remember what the exact difference is between them. But regardless, the memory ends up being a thing of like, oh, like, it wasn't like she straight up just killed the cat for no reason. It was more so she remembers it fully that her dad, because the cat got ran over and was kind of dying, and her dad pushed her to kill the cat, which obviously you could look at as a merciful killing, but the fact is her dad wanted her down that route of like, oh yeah, because he saw so much of himself in Betty, because it's like, Alice and him were in that position, that situation, but Alice wasn't like him. Betty was like him, so that's why he found, a literal kindred spirit in her. And obviously that's something she's dealing with, of like, okay, I got the serial killer gene, I don't think being here at this program is good for me. But then you have Charles being like, oh, I have the serial killer gene, which, like, maybe I'm wrong to think that. I mean, maybe it's not. I'm about to say, you would assume it's hereditary, so I feel like, having the dad she did. But remember, Charles and Betty have different dads. Obviously, his dad is FP, which we haven't even seen anything on that front. So, like, it begs the question, like, he spent a little time around Jughead, not a lot, because even though that's your half-brother, because I think that speaks volumes too. It's like, you're so fascinated with, I mean, we haven't really seen you, like, obviously with the confines of the story, you've been around Alice, but we haven't seen you around Alice. We've seen you around Betty a lot. It's almost like you're borderline obsessed with her, but I don't see you spending time with your dad or your half brother. So, or even your other half sister, that being Jellybean. He hasn't touched that side of the family. He stayed allocated just to Alice and Betty. I wonder, that begs the question why. But maybe there's truth to the fact that he has a serial killer gene. Because, like I said, I was thinking maybe it was a genetic thing, but I'm like, no, it doesn't have to be. I mean, it could be a genetic thing that just it doesn't activate for most people. I mean, just because you have it doesn't mean it's necessarily active, or maybe having it does. But it does kind of get Betty starting to think, because it's like, what do we really know about Charles? It's like he goes to Pops, he goes home, and he comes to the job. Those are the only places. So like beyond that, it's like, where is he going? What is he doing all the time? So it's like Betty's going to be investigating him, which is going to be interesting, because it seems like obviously he's spying and, like I said, borderline obsessed with her. So it's interesting how that's kind of going to play out. I'm curious to see what that ends up being like. It does seem like Charles is kind of like I said, a bit obsessive. The fact is, like, I'm still thinking everything from last episode was something he concocted. I believe that the fact is that he set that situation up so he can kind of be her hero. I don't think it was Polly like Betty believes it was, but we'll see in the long run. But I do like that while that's happening, we hard cut to spring, and FP shows up and he's arresting Archie, Veronica, and Betty for Jughead's murder, which is kind of like everyone's looking like, holy shit, wait, what? So obviously kind of feeding into like, okay, you think it's like, okay, you're just because it's like, okay, it's not gonna be that clear cut, but even with the looks on their faces, it's like, okay, like they did do it, but it's like, what's going on that front? Like, is it something that obviously that they're covering up? They're not even letting FP know. Like I said, I think Jughead did something, and well, no, because remember, there's Jughead's body, and so it's like, what the fuck is it? I don't know. Something's going on here. So it's like, you're just waiting to try to get the pieces to the puzzle that you can get, so you can try to see if you can guess the twist ahead of time. And that's just how I am. But I'm so curious to find out like what that is. Like, because at first I'm like, okay, it's gonna be so easy to be like, oh, it's supposed to be this one thing, but it turns out like Jughead's body showing up, like you literally seeing FP and Betty looking at it, made you go, huh. Now they're being arrested for the potential murder. It's like, okay, so what the hell happened? We'll ultimately have to wait and see as things kind of progress. I guess in the grand scheme of things, like, this is interesting that this knowledge comes up right when Betty's learned, like that scene cuts in like after Betty's learned about the fact is that like, oh, she's gonna be a serial killer, that not she's gonna be a serial killer, that she has that serial killer gene and everything. Then it's immediately it comes after Jughead learns that they're writing the next the chapters they're supposed to be writing to decide who's going to be the next author to take over and start writing those series of books. It's supposed to be about making the perfect murder. So, like I said, whatever went down with Jughead has something to do with Stonewall, and like his classmates. But once again, we'll ultimately have to wait and see where everything kind of takes us going forward with all of that. And now moving on to this week's episode of Stumptown. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, it's a really interesting episode because we, learning a little bit more about Dax, because we get introduced to her ex, Fiona, which has got to be crazy when your ex is like this big time, essentially rock star. And the fact of the matter is, you see her all over the place. You even to the point like she's like, yeah, this one goes out to the one that got away. I'm talking about you, Dex. And it's like, oh, her and Hoffman are kind of on a somewhat pseudo date. And it's like, oh, wow. So that's your ex and everything. But when you think about the timeline and everything, because she was saying like it was like 10 years ago, and the way Fiona talks about things later on, it's like, right, it was like, yeah, after you came back, it's like, oh, like the fact is you'd wake up screaming, sweating, and then you'd hold on to my hand. So it's like, this was after everything, Benny related, because that's the whole thing of like, it's hard to say whether everything she's experienced is purely just from her time in the military, or is it specifically the Benny stuff. It's kind of hard to say. It seems like maybe it's a combination of the two, but this might have been Fiona might have been her first relationship outside of the Benny situation, which is like, after things ending the way they did there, like it's understandable that things might be super complicated in the grand scheme of things, of like probably like, you know, they were very good together, but obviously that was her also dealing with like I said, it's the first relationship. It's like a relationship on top of you dealing with basically your PTSD that you've yet to really deal with, along with the PTSD of just your time there, your time with Benny and that whole situation, the guilt and all of that. So it seems like they were kind of a bit of party animals and stuff like that. And obviously you have Dex kind of finding herself kind of seduced back into it and everything. Obviously, you know, Fiona's hiring her. It's like, oh, I have a stalker. I need you to help me deal with that. You know, it's like, I need someone I can trust. And you could just tell, like, you see Dex kind of like so like kind of off guard, because she's just kind of like, yeah, it's like, it's hard, you know, like, I guess it's kind of like there was an intense fire between them. So it's kind of like, yeah, just that relationship that kind of sticks with you. It's actually kind of interesting because, you know, obviously she's asking questions like, oh, so what about you and Hoffman? It's like, oh, he's a cop. And it's like, oh, so there's nothing more. It's like, I don't know. It's like, oh, would you want there to be something more between you? And when it comes to like Hoffman trying to help her out and everything, she's like, so what's up between you and Dex? He's like, how about we focus on this? Because he's like, if I were you, I'd be careful. Basically saying that people like me and Dex, you will spend your entire life trying to figure us out. And you might not want to check in that phone. Be careful where you're scrolling through the phone. Might find some photos that are not safe for work. So it's like, you know, because she looks at Hoffman as competition for Dex's attention and heart. So, like, obviously she's kind of taking little jabs here and there. And ultimately they end up catching who they believe to be the pseudo stalker. Ends up being this dude named Martin, who was saying like, oh, Fiona was writing him and stuff like that. But it was also interesting in the grand scheme of things, you know, when it turns out it wasn't actually him, because at first it seems like maybe Fiona really did write him all these letters, egging him on to be like, oh yeah, come see me, protect me and stuff like that. But then we find out it was her manager. Her manager just needed her desperate enough to keep needing him. I mean, he also talked about the fact is like all this kind of fueled her inspiration and stuff. So I think maybe there was some level of that, like, oh, keeping her inspired, keeping those creative juices running, but more so than anything, it's like, oh, you know, I guess he was obsessive in his own way, because it's like, oh, I want you to need me type of situation. But obviously, you know, it's actually kind of sad because Fiona looks at it, it's like, come on, Dex, go on tour with me. And it's like, sadly, that rock star lifestyle isn't what Dex is all about. And that's the whole thing. Like, maybe Dex was kind of like that at one point in time, but the question is, like, when Fiona met her, was Dex like that because of everything that happened in the past, or was she just naturally like that to begin with, you know? It's kind of, you know, hard to say, but Fiona was like, oh, the fact of the matter is this PI work is so important to you. I think you're forgetting one key component that she wasn't even considering that conversation. Now, I think Dax was probably like, you didn't even think about that. So the fact is that it's like, you might be the same person you were all those years ago. I'm not, because Dex has grown because she's responsible for someone else. She's responsible for her little brother. And it's like, that didn't seem like that clicked in her mind to be like, no, I'll take care of you and everything like that. But it's like, at no point when she was talking about all this stuff about Dex, like, come on tour with me, it'll be crazy, we'll be able to party, it'll be wild. At no point did she go, oh yeah, your bro Ansel. That wasn't even a thought for her. But it's like, Dex made it clear. It's like, my brother is my world. And last episode showed you, like, when it comes to her brother being in danger, she doesn't play around with that shit, you know, like the whole Frank situation. So I think that's kind of interesting, which an argument could be made. It's like, well, you kind of leave your brother in Gray's hands, which obviously, you know, like, the fact is you trust Gray to look after your brother, yet you're still pissed at him about everything, because it's like, oh, I don't really know you and stuff like that. It's like, I guess it's so interesting, because I think it's a thing of like, you recognize that issue in other people but not yourself. The fact of the matter is, maybe there's stuff about you that you're not dealing with, but obviously Gray knows about it. So it's like, you're kind of an open book. And so I guess for her, it's like, I think probably, because out of anyone in this world, Gray is the person she's closest to. Like, they've had this friendship for so long, he's known so much about her. But like, I thought I knew you, and it turns out I know nothing about you. So obviously that hurts, because she feels like, for one, it's like, your situation, your lies and everything led to my brother being put in a situation he should have never been in. But at the same time, I think it also stems from the fact that she's hurt, because it's like, I thought I knew you. I thought you were my friend. I thought you were someone that really cared about me. But if you cared about me, for one, you wouldn't put my brother in that situation. Plus, you wouldn't have lied to me. But for him, it's like, I did everything I could to keep your brother out of this situation, keep you and your bro out of this situation. This was my problem he was trying to deal with. But obviously, that's not the easiest, like, message to kind of get across. But he kind of throws that in Dex's face later on. It's like, oh, you're now worried about leaving your bro with me after you made such a point to be like, oh, because she was kind of nitpicking because it's like, oh, you got this random person Liz around my brother, like, especially after everything. I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. And it's like, oh yeah, anytime you want to kind of sleep with someone, you live your brother with me. So it's like, really, do you have room to judge? But obviously they're saying stuff they don't mean. They're just, both hurting in their own way, because Gray's just, he wants things to kind of go back the way they were between him and Dex. But even Dex is like, maybe this is the new us. There is no going back to the way things kind of were before, just after, and I was so curious to see like what that situation was going to look like going forward, because obviously Gray gets introduced to this lady Liz, who seems like, oh, things are kind of hitting off. Obviously Ansel didn't like it, and I don't like understanding, because I was like wondering if it was like, oh, is it because he thinks Dax and Gray should be together? I was wondering if it was kind of something like that, but it's like, no, because for him it's like them fighting and arguing. That's where it's like he was worried that Gray was going to leave like their parents, which kind of gives us a little more insight. And it wasn't just their mom and dad. It seems like both of their parents left them. The question is, was it one at a time? It could have been a situation, like I said, I brought up before, like could have been a situation where one died and then the other one left. Could it be that they both died? Could it be that they both left? I feel like in a situation like that, you rarely see like both parents abandon their children. So I think it's like one might have left and another one left, or maybe one left and one, like I was saying, like I'm curious to kind of dive into that, because that's something we still haven't tackled yet. And so he was afraid of that. And Gray was saying like, because Dax tried to be like, the fact of the matter is people fight and argue, it's okay, like, but even Gray's like, no matter how mad your sister is at me, I'm never going to leave, because Ansel is not only important to Dax, he's important to Gray as well, because I'm sure as much, because I'm sure in a way it's like Ansel's kind of like his best friend, kind of like a brother to him. So it's kind of like, I was like, I'm not going to leave you, dude, because let's not forget the combination to his safe is Ansel's birthday. So it's like, he cares a lot for Ansel. So, but it's an interesting situation we find ourselves in with this whole, relationships, because obviously Hoffman asked his colleague about, like, part of me was almost wondering, was she kind of hinting at the fact that she might like Hoffman? I don't know. I kind of got that vibe, but, she's like, oh, you got girl trouble. So it's like, well, the fact of the matter is, I could hook you up with someone that isn't as, maybe she was just trying to do a masala. Like, no, I can hook you up with someone. Part of me was almost thinking she was insinuating herself. I don't know. Maybe I was reading too much into it, but I kind of had a feeling like, yo, she might have a thing for Hoffman. But like I said, that might not be the case. But for her, it's like, because Hoffman wasn't sure where Dex was, whether Dex was really serious about this or not. And then he was like, about Friday. She's like, what about Friday? I interpret that scene as her being like, oh, she forgot about Friday. But I guess for him, it's the thing of like, he didn't want to, because the lady was like, you need to kind of tell Dex what's up. If you kind of like her, let her know. Because you're trying, like, because the whole thing of like, he was like, oh, I kind of told her how it is. And she's like, oh, how did you tell her? It's like, oh, you didn't tell her. It's like, you can't just like let that stuff sit. Like, if you have feelings for her in a way, like, let her know how you're feeling, because she's not a psychic. Women aren't going to just know how you're feeling unless you tell them, which I could get behind, because like the sense of like, I'm one of those dudes that's like, girl likes you like a girl, you're hesitant to really kind of say it. It's kind of like, someone else has to kind of push me, and and in this case it ended up pushing Hoffman to be like, yo, kind of step up, So, but like I said, I interpret it as like, did Dex forget? But it's like, I think he was trying to muster up the courage to say something, but he was like, no, never mind. I'll wait till Friday, maybe, so. Well, at the same time, there's everything between Gray and Liz. And he actually ended up opening up much to her. Ends up finding out the fact is that his mom left when he was 6. And it's like, for him, it's like, no, because the fact is she was dealing, like, I think for him, it was like that he was fine with her leaving, because honestly, she wasn't strong enough to deal with the situation of like his father was kind of some low grade, criminal. And that kind of sadly put him in a position where he eventually becomes a criminal. It's like Grand Theft Auto. I keep saying Grand Theft Auto. I keep saying that. Sorry. I guess because I just have to always auto complete it. Because more often than when I hear Grand Theft is always followed by auto. Not just because of the game, but just in general. Regardless, Grand Theft was kind of like the gateway drug, and it led to him becoming basically the career criminal that he did, led to him becoming associated with a bad guy like Kane, and so on and so forth. So it's interesting, because I guess for him, after this whole situation with Dex, it kind of made him go like, absolute, what was the term she used? Basically, it was kind of like basically absolute, I forgot what the term was she was using, but it was basically like supposed to be the most extreme form of honesty. Rather than just being honest, be extremely honest. And he was honest with Dex, but when it comes to Liz, he was being, I think he wasn't trying to make that mistake again of making it clear because he didn't want to compromise any other future relationships because of like him only being honest and not absolutely honest, you know? So I just thought that was kind of a neat situation. But she does ask like, oh, so what about you and Dex? It's like, we're just friends, which obviously that's a complicated thing because it's like, for him, it's like, obviously, he wanted more, and I think there's always been a part of him that has wanted more. Even Dex wants more between them, but both of them are off with someone else, and you're just kind of like, it's one of those situations where, like, you two should totally be together. You're both kind of messed up in your own ways, but you should totally be together. But that's the thing of, like, if we go down that route, we might, you know, because that was Dex's big worry of, like, maybe everything was going to implode, you know? Hence why, like, her relationship with Fiona was played out the way it did. And obviously, you know, like I said, this all stems from her still dealing with everything Benny related. So relationships aren't really something she's really too keen on it. But I think with Hoffman, she's trying to make it work. But, you know, we'll see if that ends up getting complicated. But obviously everything between Liz and Gray, which is a part of me that's wondering, like, you don't think this Liz thing, I don't know, it just seems like the timing is interesting. So part of me is wondering, like, is there more to it? Probably not. Just once again, my conspiracy hat on and everything, I'm like, oh, there's more to it. But it's like, no, there's probably not. But I'm curious to see where things kind of go from there, like them, you know, where Dax and Gray kind of go from here, like building their relationship back up, building that trust back up, both of them in the workings of relationships and what that means in the grand scheme of things. But let's not forget, Dex found that ring in Gray's dresser, so I'm assuming that was going to be for her, you know, which she had asked him, like, oh, is there anything else you're hiding? And he said no, but she knows about the ring, but doesn't tell him that she knows about the ring. So maybe because in her mind it's like, oh, she wasn't thinking it was about her. Maybe she was, and maybe this will make her go, maybe I was just reading too much into the situation. I don't want to jump to the conclusion that it's about me. Or maybe there's a part of her mind that didn't even think it was about her. I immediately thought it was about her, but then I was like, maybe not. We'll see what ends up becoming of that. But I just think it's kind of interesting what they've kind of set up. And not just that, set everything up with Tukey. I love that, you know, the inspector's there and everything, and there's literally a bug there, and he squishes it. It's like, yeah, everything's good. So he's getting shut down. He goes to visit Lieutenant Cosgrove and everything. He's like, my mom told me, like, if I'm ever need help from the cops, you know, you go to the top, you know. And so he's talking to her, and basically we end up learning for a little bit more about Tukey. And the fact is that he worked in a restaurant, but basically he made this specific sauce that Cosgrove was like, oh my God, I love that sauce. And it's like, oh, for that place that he's like, I worked there, but he's kind of got bad blood there because the dude who runs the restaurant took his recipe, put his own name on it, and for Tukey, that's why he kind of went out on his own, I think, to kind of be like, no, you know what, I promise I'd never make that sauce again, because that asshole basically took what was mine and made it his own and claimed that it was his own. So, but Cosgrove is hooking Tukey up with that situation. He hooks her up with the sauce. She's like, oh. Then she shares some food that she's working on. He's like, oh, honestly, this is good. She's like, oh, you're just saying that. He's like, no, I lie about it, but this, I'm always honest when it comes to food. He does his own little thing with it. I'm like, what's happening here? This completely blindsided me, that what they're setting up with this old Tukey and Cosgrove thing. And I was like, whoa. And it's the whole thing of like, because for her, she's like, oh yeah, it brings back memories of my marriage and stuff like that, my husband, how I met him and stuff like that. But then like Tukey gave her a taste of like, oh, his little addition to her recipe. She's like, oh my God, it's super good. It's like she's like, you know, I'm married, right? And he's like, yeah, I'm married too. Which I'm like, are you? I didn't know you were married. I mean, you know, like I said, we're slowly but surely learning more about Tukey, but I love that him being like, yeah, this is just a collaboration. And she's like, okay. And she's like, you know, he's like, see you later, Lieutenant Cosgrove. And she's like, my friends call me Bobby. And I'm like, what? That's neat. That's incredible. I'm like, what do we do? Is that, for one, is that real? Is that the fact is that Tukey really being married? I wonder, did he just say that to make her feel better? Was there, you know, like love is budding in the air, because we had like a 3-way love story, kind of love situations going on this episode. I mean, technically 4 if you count in like the whole complicated Dex and Fiona situation, but I'm like, holy shit, love is in the air. Holy crap. So I'm curious to see, I'm definitely invested in that and be like, what the hell is that going to be? That's going to be interesting, because I think we're going to see a different side of Cosgrove going for it, especially when it comes to Tukey. Maybe even when she sees Dex, it's like, oh, so how your friend Tukey doing? I would love that ended up being the case. I wonder, is like her and her husband in a bad space or something? Like maybe they're separate, she's just not letting anyone know, but it's just kind of like a Or maybe it isn't. Maybe it isn't like that. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, trying to like I'm already throwing the the bouquet and everything. But it's like no, they're just friends, and that'd be kind of interesting to be like because like I said, she just seems kind of stern. But obviously we've seen a little bit of a lax side of her, especially like some of like her conversations with Hoffman and stuff like that. But it makes me wonder in the grand scheme of things. Or, what's going to happen there? Are we going to see an even more lax side of her? I'm very excited to see where ultimately all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.